So just to say a really warm welcome. My name's Vicky Hook and welcome to the launch event of Acacia's multilingual films. We're so pleased that so many of you are joining us today. We've had a fantastic response to this event. You're very, very welcome. I can see that people are still joining and popping in. So we'll make a start and I'll run you through the agenda for the day. We really value your time and the whole event is going to take no more than 90 minutes. And we're so excited that people from all over the country are joining us. And although we're on Zoom, we're excited to share this space with colleagues from all sectors coming together as part of the perinatal mental health community. As you are from all over the UK, we're aware that many of you won't know who we are or about our work. So just to explain a little bit about us. Acacia Family Support is a perinatal mental health charity that was founded in 2003 by two local mums, Emma and Rachel, who, after recovering from their own experiences of maternal mental health issues, set up the charity to support others. Since then, we've been delivering a variety of face-to-face, individual, group support, we've been running centres, for pregnant mothers and new parents across Birmingham for nearly 20 years now. We're a user-led Christian charity that has a workforce of 30 staff and over 50 trained volunteers that work for us every week. As we've grown as a charity, Birmingham, which is known as a super diverse city, has grown too. And we've worked hard to ensure that the families most in need of support will be able to access our services fairly and without barriers. For the past 10 years, we've been running a variety of different projects that support mothers from minority ethnic communities, particularly in the main, but not exclusively, mothers from South Asian communities. And today's films are very much a continuation of that work. We want them to be shared and used widely, so we can raise awareness of issues faced and help signpost families to support. Most importantly, we want to normalise and reassure and explain that no parent should feel alone. The agenda for the day is as follows. We're going to start with hearing from Pooja, Acacia's project coordinator for minority ethnic communities and the project manager for the films. And Pooja is going to start by giving you some information and context to the project and the films and some of her reflections of her work over the past 5 years. Then we're going to take a look at an edited version of all 6 films. We're delighted today to welcome Faiza, Amandeep, Katerina and Zahira, who took part in the films. Sadly, Dr. Anita, who's the GP, can't be with us today because of work commitments. After we've shown the films, you'll have a chance to listen to their reflections on their experiences and their work with families before a short interactive Q&A session. After this, we're going to be welcoming Nat and Sarah from the Hearts and Minds Partnership, and they're going to tell us about this England-wide partnership of the perinatal mental health VCS sector and services, and share with you some visuals of their website and digital map of perinatal mental health services, VCS services across England, which I'm sure so many of you will find really, really useful for your work. Towards the end of the session, my colleague Rob will give you some info about where and how you can download the films. And as I say, please use and share them far and wide. The session is being recorded. There's a chat box if you want to enter your comments. And there's also an opportunity to ask some questions. And my colleague Rob will be doing his best to answer your questions as you go along. And do, in that Q&A box, make sure that you ask some questions to our panelists today. There's a hashtag if you want to go on Twitter, hashtag Acacia Films Launch. I think that's it for housekeeping. So I don't want to do much talking today. You're not here to hear me talk. So I'm going to start with handing over to my colleague, Pooja. Pooja, over to you.
Thank you, Vicky. Thanks for that introduction as well. So I am Pooja Patel. I'm a health psychologist and yeah, I was leading on helping develop these films for Acacia. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of my reflections really and learning throughout this journey. And it kind of all kickstarted back in 2015. So next slide, please. So the purpose really of the Ethnic Minority Awareness Raising Project was to raise awareness around perinatal mental health issues in community groups, cultural groups across Birmingham, and where and how to access support. It was a 3-year funded piece of work with then the goal to kind of have this practice rolled out into our teams in Acacia. And I suppose the reason behind this work was, well, those from sort of non-white racial groups and ethnic minority backgrounds face a lot more health inequalities due to health inequities. Health inequities are those socially kind of produced differences, which are much more systemic. And these are avoidable differences in health amongst different groups of people. So when care is often received by individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds, it's much more likely to be a poorer quality care due to a myriad of different factors, from racial prejudices, language barriers, cultural barriers. And this really starts this cycle of negative bias, leading to more health inequalities. And the other reason why this work was done was really because perinatal mental health concerns are often dismissed or misunderstood in many communities, where poor mental health may be a taboo subject or a topic that's not widely discussed. So it was really our duty to raise awareness and ensure that communities do have fairer access to support if required and when wanted. So like I mentioned, I joined the team back in 2015 with the goal really to submerge myself into the community. I was rarely in the office. I think Vicky and Rob recall that I was probably in the office only a handful of times within a month. But being in the community was really the only way for me personally to understand community needs and to develop those connections and those links. So the first 3 or 4 months was really just creating those links and connections with community leads and explaining the purpose of our work. We created leaflets and booklets with the support of our community members. And then I really got stuck in. I was primarily based at schools, school parent clubs, stay and play groups, faith-based community groups, voluntary groups, educational centres for older adults. And to date, we engaged with over 300 community members in Birmingham, raising awareness around what perinatal mental health is, the signs and symptoms, where to access support, through focus groups, through online groups, one-to-one conversations, and awareness raising workshops. We also had some of you may have attended our Acacia conference back in 2020, which was attended by over 120 delegates, in which there were many discussions around working with different community groups and engagement. As you can imagine, most of our work had changed over lockdown, so we did have to completely reshape this project with a lot more online engagement, more one-to-one support, and just really understanding how communities worked over that lockdown period and tapping into them when we could. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a bit of some of my reflections when I was working in the community, and a bit of an insight into some of my learnings. When I first went out and did a community workshop, it was a cross-generational group based in the community, and I very naively thought I could deliver a few workshops and that would be enough. They'd have all the knowledge and information around what perinatal mental health is, what signs and symptoms look like, and where to access support. In fact, I sat there and listened to them. I listened to the group. It was an Urdu speaking group. I don't speak Urdu, so we had a translator, but I could kind of understand what was being spoken of. And it was the most eye-opening experience ever. I think we often forget that sometimes we don't have to try and fix everything. We don't have to have the answers and the solutions to everything. What we should have is those key conversational skills and listening skills. And I heard incredible stories around traditions and customs and cultural things around that perinatal period. And I think my whole model was reshaped. It really got me to reassess how I was going to interact with community groups when I was delivering workshops. And it really got me to think about how much actually are we listening to the needs of the community and the knowledge that they actually already have, and how much are we trying to fix the issues as professionals, which is something that we all do. When we have a solution to something, we want to give that solution to someone. We then that sort of kind of helped me to think about how I was going to engage with communities, and really what I was doing was just going out, building these connections, listening to the stories, and understanding their needs and what they actually wanted from me. And based on that, we developed workshops. So it was a very collaborative approach. As part of the work, I partnered up with our young parents project team members, and we delivered training to healthcare professionals as well. So health visitors, GPs, etc. So we kind of took this whole kind of population approach, and hopefully imparted some knowledge that we were kind of learning along the way as well. Next slide, please. So some of the things that I've just really picked up over my time at Acacia is we don't have to fix everything. Trying to fix issues is not the way forward. We actually end up disengaging with communities if we think we have the answers to everything. But it is really important to be very much more better versed in open, curious questioning. The more curious we are, the more kind of information we can gather from people that we're speaking with, even if there are language barriers. I think that is a key skill. We hear things like, I was listening to stories, and storytelling is a brilliant way of actually hearing some of the wisdom from these community groups around that perinatal period, and also understanding where they may actually need some support. Empathy, coming from a place of empathy and understanding their point of view is vital as well. Again, that comes in hand in hand with kind of trying not to fix everything and trying not to have when we don't have the solutions to everything. And then sort of that kind of encompassed a model for me, which is that ask, be curious, ask those open questions, listen to the stories, listen to the needs of the community, advise where appropriate, and assist where appropriate. And that's the sort of model that I kind of took. Next slide, please. So as a direct result of our Acacia conference back in 2020, we were approached to create some films. And this was just another way for us to kind of really get the message out there around what perinatal mental health was in various different languages. So we were asked to create 45 different, 425, not 45, films in commonly spoken languages in Birmingham. And our strategy was really based on the links that I had. I emailed lots of different key leads. We put out information on our social media pages. We contacted previous Acacia service users, whether they wanted to be part of this film. Our expectations of the films were that we'd be filming real life stories of women who have experienced perinatal mental health issues from a range of diverse communities and backgrounds. And actually what we found was that the uptake was quite low, and we completely understood that being filmed can be quite invasive, especially when sharing personal experiences. And for some communities, perinatal mental health is very much a hidden or a taboo topic of conversation. So our strategy slightly shifted, and actually we were approached by 5 incredible women who are with us today, sharing their real life accounts as professionals and as mothers around the barriers that families face around PMH or perinatal mental health issues, the signs, the symptoms, where to access support. And we've now produced films in 6 different languages. Next slide, please. So just want to point out that actually, though we have produced these films, this is just the beginning. More films need to be created actually that are representative of culture, race, and to diversify these films. These films were heavily based around South Asian languages commonly spoken in Birmingham. But I know that Acacia are or will be seeking to create more films that can be widely disseminated. And I think it's key to continue building links through community engagement work. I think what we saw over lockdown was that a lot of grassroots organizations flourished, and ensuring that communities do have the correct information, and we pass on that information in a compassionate way, so that they are aware of what services are local to them. So my only simple takeaway tool is to ask, advise, assist. Ask openly and curiously. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Be curious, understand their point of view, be empathetic. Advise them then on current services, local agencies that they can access, and a good place to start is the Hearts and Minds Partnership, which I know will be discussed a little bit later on, and offer it in a compassionate way. Sometimes when we push our agenda, we disengage. So asking and offering it in a compassionate way is key, and advise them on signs and symptoms to look out for. And then assist on that signposting, providing that information, links to our videos. And if anything, what you've done, you've just planted a seed. That individual, that community member that you speak to will know where to come back to if they do need more information. And I think that's it from me. I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of context around the purpose of the project, what we've done, and some of the films that we've created. And I'll hand it back over to Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pooja. That's fantastic. And thank you so much for your work in getting us to this point. Like you said, this is just the beginning. This is just the start. There's more work to do. Just before we now show the films, I'd like to say again a really, really big thank you to Anita, Amandeep, Faiza, Katerina and Zahira for helping us to create them by giving us so generously their time, sharing their own lived experiences, and of course also working directly with the communities and the families that we seek to support. I'd also like to thank the West Midlands Perinatal Mental Health Clinical Network and BLMK ICS, which is made up of Central and North West London Foundation Trust and East London Foundation Trust, for helping to fund these films. We've created 6 standalone films, and each film is roughly 5 minutes long and follows a similar format. We're not going to show you all 6 films today. They're all pretty similar, but each is in different languages: Urdu, Gujarati, Punjabi, Mirpuri, Slovakian and Dari. And each film has English subtitles throughout. So we're going to show you now an edited 4-minute version of the entire collective of 6 films, and afterwards we'll be hearing from the women that took part. And don't forget to please pop any questions you have for them in the Q&A box below. So hopefully we'll be able to play the films now.
तो पेरिनेटल पीरियड क्या है? पेरिनेटल पीरियड वो वक्त है जो कि ख़वातीन के हामला होने के वक्त से लेकर बच्चे की पैदाइश के बाद के 2 साल का वक्त है। ये एक बहुत ही अहम वक्त होता है क्योंकि इसमें ख़वातीन कई तब्दीलियों से गुजरती हैं, जैसे कि हार्मोनल तब्दीली आती है जिसकी बहुत सारे असरात देखे जाते हैं जो कि आपकी ज़हनी तवाज़ुन पर भी असरअंदाज हो सकते हैं।
उस वक्त बहुत औखा हो सकता है एक औरत ਲਈ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪੰਜਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਔਰਤ ਲਈ ਮੂਡ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਤਾਂ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਔਖਾ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤੀ ਥਕਾਵਟ ਫੀਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨੀ ਵੱਧ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਨੀਂਦ ਵੀ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਆ। ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਔਰਤ ਦੀ ਮਜਬੂਰੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਰ ਵੀ ਵੱਧਦੇ ਆ। ਮਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਸਹਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਤਾਂ ਏਦਾਂ ਸੋਚਣ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਬੱਚਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਗੈਰ ਹੀ ਚੰਗਾ ਆ। ਉਹ ਏਦਾਂ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਮਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ।
Veľa ľudí si myslí, že tehotenstvo alebo narodenie dieťatka by malo byť ich najšťastnejšie obdobie, ale niekedy to tak nie je. Ja som mala napríklad rizikové tehotenstvo, čo malo veľký vplyv na moje duševné zdravie. Pocítila som stavy úzkosti a obavy a panický strach. V noci som napríklad sledovala, či moje bábätko stále dýcha a to malo vplyv na to, ako spím, ako sa cítim, či som viac vyčerpaná a unavená.
कुछ अम्मियां उस टाइम इस तरह महसूस करने के वो कुसा नाल गल नहीं बाना चाहने। खास करके असां दी कम्युनिटी विच इस तरह महसूस होना चाहिए अगर असा कुसा नाल गल बासा ते शायद असा ना बच्चा सा कोलू कोई चाहिए किते। लेकिन एक गल सच नहीं, अगर तुसा की कुसा गल्ला नी मदद चाहिए है तुसा कुसा नाल गल बाओ या अपने कुसा सहेली नाल या अपने हस्बैंड नाल या फैमिली नाल या कुसा हेल्थ केयर प्रोफेशनल नाल।
આજે પણ આપના સમાજમાં આ સમયમાં માઓ અચકાય છે વાત કરવાથી કે મદદ માંગવાથી અને લોકો અચકાય છે વાત કરવાથી, શરમ આવે છે તો આપણે આ શરમની દિવાલ તોડવાની જરૂર છે અને આ બાબતમાં જાગૃતિ વધારવાની જરૂર છે। સો મદદ માટે સ્ત્રી એના જીપી પાસે જઈ શકે છે अथवा मिडवाइफ के हेल्थ विजिटर સાથે વાત કરી શકે છે અથવા લોકો ચિલ્ડ્રન સેન્ટરમાં પણ જઈ શકે છે। ઘણી બધી ચેરિટી અને સર્વિસીસ પણ છે કે આ ટાઈમે મદદ કરી શકે છે અથવા ગાઈડ કરી શકે છે કે મદદ ક્યાંથી લેવાય, જેમ કે માઇન્ડ છે, વિમેન્સ એડ છે, હાર્ટ્સ એન્ડ માઇન્ડ પાર્ટનરશિપ છે। જો તમને ઇંગ્લિશમાં ફાવતું ના હોય તો તમારી ભાષામાં પણ મદદ મળી શકે છે અને ઇન્ટરપ્રેટની બંદોબસ્ત પણ કરી શકે છે। તો જો આપને માથે દુખ્યો કરતો હોય અથવા પેટ દુખ્યા કરતું હોય કે તાવ આવતો હોય તો આપણે એનો તરત જ ઇલાજ કરીએ છીએ ને, પ્રોફેશનલ હેલ્પ આપણે લઈએ છીએ ને, તો એ જ રીતના માનસિક રીતને સિમ્પટમ્સ રહેતા હોય તો એનો પણ ઇલાજ તરત જ કરવા જરૂરી છે।
ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ। ਬਹੁਤੀ औरतां ਏਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਸੋਚਦੀਆਂ ਆ।
तुस अपने आप की शायद अकेला महसूस करो लेकिन कई ये जे बंदे थे जो तुसानी मदद करना चाहने, तुस की सिर्फ पूछना पेना।
So there you have it. Just a flavour of, like I said, there's 6 individual standalone films in each of the languages. And I'm delighted that we can move straight into talking to the women that featured in the films who are here today with us. So I'd like to just speak to Faiza, first of all. Faiza, got a question for you to hear your reflections. Welcome. So Faiza, hello. Working as a midwife and running the Raham Project, which is an online support group for minority ethnic mothers, would you be able to tell us a little bit about how the experiences of women you support are impacted by their culture and ethnicity?
Of course. So Acacia, thank you so much for having me join and be part of supporting you all with this great project. I think before I speak about my experiences, I need to share the current issues that ethnic women face within our maternity care systems. And a key thing to note is that ethnic women are more likely to die and have poorer health outcomes in our maternity care systems in the UK. And not only that, their babies are also similarly predisposed to having poorer health outcomes and or die in their during the pregnancy or after being born. Now, some of the things I noticed and became aware of soon into my training into midwifery. So this was about 14 years ago, that when I was caring for women from different ethnic communities, they would frequently feed back to me, you know, Faza, you were the first person who spoke to me kindly, who smiled or who listened or took their time. And this to me was always more obvious when they spoke the same kind of mother tongue as me. So essentially, if they identified with me as a brown person, they would feel safer sharing their thoughts with me. I also noticed that partners would feel more assured having someone who understood their background, caring for their wives. I will add that sometimes that's not always the case, but for my experience as a whole has always been that partners usually quite like the idea of it being somebody from their community looking after their wives. So I've spent quite a significant amount of time trying to be mindful and trying to understand why ethnic women have poorer maternity care experiences. And actually, after reflecting and learning for years, I recognise that there's a systemic issue within healthcare. There's a lot of biases and prejudices that women as a whole face, and then you add this additional layer of our ethnicity, and deprivation is another factor. And that's this like whole reason why we sometimes have poorer outcomes. Via Raham Project particularly, I hear of mothers often saying in our communities that, you know, they feel unheard. And the issue is once they start feeling unheard, you know, they're more mindful and sensitive to feeling unsupported. So it's really important that services go in with the approach of, you know, we're there for you, and like through their actions show that they're actually there for them, not just say it. Because say, for example, if there is a language barrier, mothers read on our body language, families read on people's body language. So it's really important that we let them know through our words and our actions that we're going to support them. So regarding people's culture, there's such a variation. Even within the same cultures, you can find different levels of variation. So it's really important that we can identify those, because that's how we support people in a more individual and personalized way. I would definitely want to talk a little bit about cultural nuances when it comes to mental health. So generally within the South Asian community, having a baby is predominantly a female zone. The way that we are nurtured as women, particularly South Asian women, we're generally taught to, you know, respect our elders, value their advice, and we tend to have kind of set roles that we conform to. So how this plays out when it comes to having a relationship as a patient with a healthcare professional is that we put a lot of trust into our healthcare providers, and so they are seen as a authoritative figure. Now, in some ways that's great, but in other ways it can really impact our own kind of autonomy and our ability to make objective judgments and decisions. I think if we're going to talk about kind of ethnicity and culture, we need to be aware of like historical and racial differences that we've suffered, and this adds another layer. And actually that aspect can often with that aspect, I often hear mothers talk a lot about fears of actually raising their concerns, fears for being reprimanded. They may be referred to social services, or they have this fear that if I tell them what I'm really thinking, am I going to get into trouble or be judged? Mental health concerns generally are not fully understood, I think, by parts of our communities even now. So being health literate is really key in knowing how to look after ourselves. But obviously, this needs to be done in a way that our communities will engage and understand the issue. The taboos that, you know, mothers have, particularly after having babies, that I've noticed is they're expected to be happy straight away after having a baby. And actually, not all mums feel that, you know, it's such a life-changing experience. So You know, I've heard mums tell me when I wasn't feeling happy, people would tell me I was being ungrateful. You know, you had a live baby. It doesn't matter how your birth went. It doesn't matter how all of these other things went. Your child is alive. That's the most important thing. But it shouldn't be an isolated thing. And our standard should not be a live mother and baby. It should be a live mother and baby as our baseline, and actually a good care experience. Both are important aspects. And I think if it was a system based on what women as a whole needed, or females who carry children, it'd be very different. But I think this is where the patriarchy sets in. We like things in boxes. We like to tick things and have them in conform places. And I guess women are the most primal and non-conforming when they are birthing their babies. So when I said that mental health is not actually very well understood in our communities, sometimes people who care for us can perpetuate misinformation about health issues. So, you know, I will hear of mums telling me that, you know, they thought I was possessed, or that somebody had given me a nazar, which is an evil eye. So these kind of things don't actually help mothers necessarily. Other aspects of having a good community support network is that we can sometimes get great comfort from having our community next to us and supporting us, but other times it can overwhelm us. And actually it's really important to strike that balance. So I've got a generation of people, say my mum's generation, where we lived in really big joint families, and that's still generally the case. And so they had lots of support, but that sometimes hindered them from feeling comfortable. For example, early days, postpartum, learning to navigate motherhood, breastfeeding. And, you know, there comes this barrier of modesty, and it's hard to be modest and breastfeed a newborn baby with other males in the home. Alternatively, when you've got people of my generation now who have got more nuclear families, even though we live very close to our families still, we've got the opposite issue where we want to get the support, but kind of within reason, like just let us pace ourselves. So I think understanding all of these little aspects of communities is really important. And essentially, the only thing I can say is listening to each individual will give you the answer of what their need is. And I think if we just made it as simple as that we just listen to each individual, we'll probably get them to where they need to be, or they're going to guide us, and we're going to just make sure that we're supporting them along the way. So it's really important knowing all of these factors and how they come into play.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, you covered such a lot. That was absolutely so fantastic. Thank you. You talked about mothers feeling unheard and body language, connection, language, changes to the family structure, the wider systemic issues that we're facing. So thank you so much. Really, really insightful issues that you've covered there. That neatly follows on to my next question, which I'm going to pose to Dr. Zahira Kapasi. So there are many barriers that non-white mothers face when accessing community mental or specialist perinatal mental health services. Just like you to reflect a little bit on what are some of the first steps that services can take to offer more culturally relevant support.
Thanks, Vicky, and good morning, everyone. I just want to say, watching back the videos, I felt quite emotional actually, just thinking about how important this work that you're doing really is. So thank you for everything that you all are doing at Acacia, and for allowing me to have the honour of being a small part of it. I think the question that you're asking is a really important one actually, and one that we probably need to continue to ask ourselves as service providers, as it doesn't really have a simple answer, does it? Or one that can be answered in a few minutes. And I think the answers may evolve over time, depending on need, research, the feedback that we receive, and the resources available to us. But one of the things I think that always seems to come to the forefront, particularly when thinking about mental health services more broadly, is the need to focus on accessibility and its application at all stages of the patient or client journey. So, you know, Pooja was talking about really connecting with the communities. So really thinking about our access and connection with the communities around, our assessment processes, formulations, you know, how we understand people's experiences,
intervention and the transition back from the service and integration into community, and then how we evaluate the service as a whole and all those processes individually and collectively. And perhaps one of the key things that we can do is to identify who we are actually serving. So we may have a targeted audience, but they may not necessarily be the ones coming through the door. You know, as Faiza said, we have a lot of partners as well who are coming. So, you know, we need to continue to research and identify the demographic of the people around us, and those accessing the service as perhaps a step to identify who we're not reaching, because that will be different for each service. And once we do that, yes, we can look at those accessing the service and how we're meeting those needs, but also we can start to build steps towards reaching out to those that we're not able to access, and what barriers there might be and how we might be able to minimize those. And I think, you know, thinking about that, you know, it is really thinking about that at every stage. How inclusive and accessible are we at each stage in the service provision? So listening to Faiza, we realise the importance of, you know, the individual stories and experiences. So for example, during the assessment process, are we flexible with the time that we give for people to tell their stories, for us to listen and fully understand those experiences? Are we compassionately curious? You know, do we ask about culture at home, specific worldviews, faith, beliefs, expectations that might guide or impact on how someone might view their difficulties or engage with their well-being and their care, particularly post having baby, you know. So it doesn't have to be very complex things, really. I think these are things that we probably all know or are aware of, but perhaps when services are stretched, we're faced with increased complexity or risk. These simple steps are sometimes the first things that we can kind of drop or leave behind. So I think it's allowing ourselves to pause in all the busyness in order to go back to some of those basics, really.
Thank you so much. I love that expression of being compassionately curious. And just, it's not rocket science, is it? Seeing the importance of the individual, like you said, being flexible. Are you flexible with your time? That was really connecting with the community, and thinking about who we're not reaching as much as who we are, also so vital. Thank you so much, Zahira. That was really, really interesting. You mentioned thinking, you know, specifically about different cultures and different faiths, and I'd like to bring in Katerina now. Katerina, could you talk a little bit about some of the specific barriers that mothers from Eastern European communities face when engaging with perinatal mental health services? I think we've got a lot to learn there. And welcome. And you're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you.
There we are.
Thank you, Vicky. Just wanted to say hello to everybody as well, and thank you for having me here. So, talking a little bit about barriers within Eastern European communities, I think there are still lack of information and knowledge around mental health. I think there's still a perception that then you only seek help when you experience serious mental health difficulties, and unfortunately still some perceived stigma around that. And lots of people then feel worried about raising their concern, because worry that the baby will be taken away as well. So I think that's why it's so important for these short films to raise that awareness in different communities and normalize these experiences, so people can seek support when they need it. And sometimes sort of I feel there's the language barrier that can be a sort of a problem accessing services as well. And so I feel that sort of these films in the different languages can help that to sort of signpost them to relevant services as well. I myself actually had quite difficult pregnancies, and this affected sort of my mental health. In my first pregnancy, I was 8 weeks in hospital, and I was worried about sort of losing my little one. So that increased my sort of anxiety, and I was worried so much and feeling panicky. But this was pre-COVID, and I had that support as well from sort of from work and from my colleagues and from the services. But my second pregnancy was during COVID lockdowns, and that was a little bit harder for me because I felt more isolated. I think what is true about some of the people from Eastern European communities is that many of them don't have their families here. Their families are in their countries, and that can be isolating in its own right. So the community becomes a second family as such. And so when you are cut off from that support, that can be quite difficult for people, as it was for me as well. So that's what I feel, sort of having this platform and having sort of this film to raise that awareness is very important. And I'm glad that I could be part of this amazing work to raise that awareness for people in different communities. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And then there was a similar point that you made there to Pfizer at the beginning about the changes to family structures. There's the generational changes, and now we have more of a nuclear family, but obviously you also reflected on the fact that, you know, a lot of families from Eastern European communities and other communities are without this wider support network. So not only is it society changing structure, so now there's more of a nuclear family, but then also people obviously don't have that wider network from their other countries that they're from as well. So that's really important points to make. Thank you so much. Just going to move now finally to Amandeep. Welcome, Amandeep. Just like to ask you the question of how you think NHS mental health services, where you work, and the community voluntary sector can work together to ensure that we provide culturally relevant and safe services to patients from minority ethnic communities.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to start again by just saying thank you for involving me in the project. It's been such an honor to work with you guys to create this resource. I think this is it. This is how we can start working together as an NHS service. When I reflect on this question, I'm thinking of collaboration and strengths. Both the NHS mental health services and the voluntary sector have great strengths, and I think we reflect a lot on what's missing. And actually what we need to have a think about is bridging that gap and thinking about what that would look like. I'm really lucky to work in a fantastic team who have peer support workers, and they're employed by the voluntary sector, but also support, and they also work within our teams, within our multidisciplinary teams. The work that I've done with our peer support workers has been so invaluable with the therapy work that I've been doing with the clients. And this is what the clients say, that it's so helpful to have someone who understands, who's been through the same experiences as me. So not just the same language that I know that Pfizer and Zahira have spoken about. It's not just about the inclusivity of the language and the background, but also the inclusivity of the mental health experience. There is an element of NHS services looking quite scary. And I think that's where we need to work together as services to feel more accessible. And it is about being able to raise awareness, but in a supportive and compassionate way. And I think these videos is one step to that bigger goal.
and it's going to have such an impact. So even though it's just a minute of video, but actually the impact that's going to have on someone's life who's going to say, oh, actually I can go to these places and seek support, is going to be tremendous. So I think it's about finding those strengths, bridging those gaps, and being in the community to really hear and understand, like Pooja said earlier, being able to really compassionately listen and understand and meet their needs from an individual level. And when you start meeting an individual's level, you start seeing the system for what it is as well. So yeah, it's just about making the whole of it seem more accessible and less frightening, and working on these projects, these research projects, to be able to gain more access and more support. And that, I think, is what's going to create that psychological safety for us as clinicians, but also for the service users that we serve.
Thank you so much, Amandeep. That was really interesting. We're going to just have a quick Q&A session now. And I think what I'd like to start with is something that you literally just spoke about, Amandeep. You said that sometimes NHS services can feel quite scary. I wondered if you had some reflections on how, when you're individually working with clients, what are some of the things that we can do individually? Because the system is very big, to make, when you're working individually with a client, to make the NHS feel like less of a scary place and more, like you said, psychologically safe. I wonder, Faiza, if you have any reflections on that.
Interestingly, I'm actually working closely with 2 other charities local to Peterborough that are where we're trying to undertake some work where we bridge that gap. I think there needs to be better education for maternity systems, because I think that's where the gap is. I think the climate of what's happening in maternity means that taking their time to learn these sort of barriers that our communities are facing is not happening as well as it should be. So I really feel the voluntary sector is doing really good work, and then the hospital is doing their own work. But I really think the voluntary sector has identified that they need to bridge the gap. I think the health community needs to now come and join us. I think that's where the crux is. So and I think it could be done through simple things. For example, we're looking at creating a local central hub where you've got different partners coming together, and we co-produce and co-design everything from the beginning, but you have like maternity systems in that same house. So then you create this center where mothers will meet their community midwives. They'll have additional peer support, which then after they've had the baby, because they've built that relationship with the midwives and that team of voluntary organizations, they can then feel safer to come back to them after they've had the baby. A lot of the after having a baby issue is to muster the courage to actually ask for help is so bloody hard. It feels like the hardest step. I know once you've made the step, it gets easier, but it is the hardest step. And I think it needs to be simple. The access just needs to be simplified, because all these services are there. We just need to bridge them.
Thank you. We've had a question come in that said, in Pooja, really helpful presentation. It said, you mentioned in your presentation, don't push your agenda, but how do you balance that with getting bums on seats and the targets that you have? And I guess it's that push-pull factor between, wanting to treat everybody, with curiosity and compassion and empathy, but then also working within very, very stretched services. That is such a challenge. Would anybody like to comment on that?
Do you want me to expand on what
yeah.
If we just think about ourselves, when we're told to do something, it's unwanted advice, we're not quite ready to hear it. How does that make you feel? It makes us feel quite threatened. We might disengage. We won't build that relationship. We won't build that rapport. So really, it's just about, I think all of the women here have talked about it. It's those key listening skills. And part of I mean, something that I sometimes use is agenda setting. So if you're working with people individually, it's agreeing on an agenda together, what's going to be discussed that day. So those expectations are met. But equally, as professionals, we've got a duty of care, and our agenda also needs to be heard, because we want to ensure that this person that we're working with, or the community that we're working with, gets that fair access, or that the level of care that they need. But it is all about those, I think we've all kind of touched on it, it's those key conversational skills and those key listening skills, because every person that we meet is different, and it's quite easy to box communities together. You know, we've got 4 brown women here, but we're all from very different backgrounds. We've got very different experiences. So yeah, when I'm talking about agenda, and there's actually a lot of evidence out there that if we push our agenda, we don't actually get anywhere with anyone. It's about listening and understanding community needs, or individual needs, and then working together collaboratively.
If I can also add to that, Vicky, one of the things I learned only from coming away from the shop floor grind as a midwife and coming into the voluntary side, I mean, I still work clinically as a midwife, was exactly that. I got the space to pause, and the space isn't just for families. We've got to create a system where there's space for healthcare professionals. You can't truly be reflective if you're constantly being pushed beyond your limits. So it's really twofold. It's a relationship-based approach that suits the families and suits the healthcare professionals. And I think one of the biggest reasons why this is not happening is a governmental issue. I think it's something happening right up there that is not allowing us to make those real changes down here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I may just jump on that, Vicky, as well, I think, you know, from a service provision point of view, Amandeep, you touched on it earlier in talking about strengths of our services, and us always focused on what we're missing, but there's so much strength. And there is a lot of good work happening, isn't there? There's some amazing clinicians out there. And perhaps some of this, in terms of balancing that kind of meeting the targets, also meeting the need, is really about getting feedback. And I don't think we're there yet in terms of getting the good feedback. When we do a good job, when we feel like the people that we're working with, you know, we've tried to listen and we've given them that reflective space, are we getting the feedback qualitatively and quantitatively? And I think it is a balance. You don't want to kind of overform or get, you know, sort of overindulge in feedback either. But it is really important if we were to kind of share with our commissioners and those that are funding our services to say, hey, this is actually an important part of care. We can't do good care without it. So yeah, that's just what I want to say. Thank you.
And you know, Zahira, I feel like a lot of the workload would be lifted if we connected with more voluntary organizations, because they're doing the part that we really want to be doing, and then we can bring that safety net of the you know, clinical side. And actually, if we build good relationships with the voluntary side and they're doing that, it's only going to just make things more streamlined for the people who need our care, right?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's what we obviously feel so passionate about, is what the voluntary sector can bring to the entire perinatal mental health landscape, and you know, working alongside the Hearts and Minds partnership that we're going to hear from really soon, we just see up and down the country these pockets of excellence where you have the voluntary sector and charities and community groups integrated and working so beautifully alongside statutory mental health services. But it's certainly not the case up and down the country, and I think that's something that we really something we can tangibly campaign for and really try to change, so we get that excellence, that best practice where we're all working together in the best interest of the mothers. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've just got time for one more question. So just in a nutshell, cultural humility within what I'm hearing, that the helping relationship is just so important. We're all individuals. Just if you could just give me a sort of real sort of golden nuggets of how we can all take steps to ensure a more person-centered, a more flexible approach when supporting mothers and fathers with mental health issues. You've said a lot of it already, but just some real takeaways for today.
Don't go in with preconceived ideas.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, that my conception of what I believe people are and who they want to be is not always the case. So put those at the back burner and just focus on what that person is presenting.
Great.
I just agree. I was going to say the exact same. I'm sorry, I think I've spoken over someone. I was going to say the exact same thing. I think we need to throw out, when we meet someone for the first time, throw out what we think is the rule book and be with the person. That's what empathy is all about, isn't it? That's what compassion is about, meeting with the person and seeing them for the human that they are. And I think that's so important. There's something about that I find quite difficult sometimes, is when we mix faith and culture together. Actually, they're actually two exclusive things. And when we just make assumptions about this is what one faith practices and that must be what their life is, every person is unique. So we need to actually assess and formulate each part of that person to really understand them, to really understand what their needs are, to get them to that place where they need to be.
Thank you, Amandeep. Okay.
I wanted to add the same, actually, compassionate listening, being present with the person, and just really listen what they're saying as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great. I think I just wanted to add as well, don't be afraid to ask questions. So sometimes, particularly from clinicians that may be of a different culture, a different language, a different background, they may have, you know, there are stereotypes everywhere, aren't they? And we can't escape those as humans. And I think sometimes supervising other clinicians, I often hear, oh, does this happen? Or and you know, kind of really supporting clinicians to ask in a compassionate way that it's okay to say, sometimes I hear this, how relevant is that for you, if at all? And I think that way you can then bring culture and still offer a very culturally sensitive approach without being judgmental or prejudiced in any way. So not being afraid to ask in a compassionate, curious way.
I think that is such a valuable point to end on there for the discussion. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking part. The comments, I want you to go and read the comments, because there is some really wonderful comments saying what an incredible group of women. I feel like we all need to get together and keep this conversation going, which we'll definitely think about. Thank you. We're going to hand over now to the Hearts and Minds Partnership. And we're going to start off with Nat, who's going to we spoke about the voluntary sector and how there's much more need to integrate voluntary sector as part of the whole perinatal mental health landscape. And I think Nat's going to explain how that's starting to happen, and a great resource that I'm sure all of you will find really, really useful. So welcome, Nat, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vicky, and thank you everybody else. What an amazing event to be part of. And just a great reminder that as a community and a wider society, we all have so much to learn in this area, and we're learning all the time. So my name's Nat, I'm lead coordinator of the Hearts and Minds Partnership. I'm a mum with lived experience, and I'm also co-founder of a perinatal mental health charity called Smile Group in the Northwest. I'm here alongside my colleague Sarah to give you a bit of an overview about Hearts and Minds and how we're helping to connect, support and celebrate the VCS sector across England. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So who are we? We are a collective of 3 perinatal mental health charities who are Bluebell in the Southwest, Acacia in the Midlands and Smile in the Northwest. We all came together with aligned values and a collectively more than 30 years experience of growing and establishing VCS charities in this sector. Very lucky to be funded by the lottery for a 3-year programme, which we're already halfway through, which is a bit scary. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 3 specific work streams in the way that we're working. The first of which is the launch of our website, which happened last autumn. Hopefully some of you will be familiar with it, and some of you already possibly engaging with our map already, which is great. So the website includes an interactive map of quality VCS services working in the perinatal mental health space across the country. And this is really our call to action. We've got about 45 to 50 services already actively engaging with the process to sign up to be part of the map, which Sarah's going to tell you a little bit more about, but we would love to be more representative and more inclusive. So if you are working in this space, please do come forward, spend a little bit of time on the website, checking out the checklist, fill it out, and we would love to hear more from you. Secondly, we've been developing trusted spaces to enable our community to come together, because we've got so much incredible learning between us, to talk to each other, share best practice, and talk very openly about the challenges that we're facing too. So you might be familiar with the Conversation Space, which has been a monthly free online meetup, which has been really well attended to date. And we talk about some topical themes that are really affecting the sector. And then lastly, we are very much in the process of developing a training programme, a modular-based training programme to meet the very real needs of established services and those who are quite new as well. So look forward to seeing a bit more about that soon. Next slide, please. It's really, really important that we all work together, and that's really the essence of what today's about, isn't it? And it's really important that we as a partnership are listening actively, compassionately and curiously to all the things that you're saying, because we really want to ensure that services across the country are accessible, that they are inclusive and that they are culturally sensitive. So we're very much engaged with this conversation, but we know we have a lot more to learn. So thank you for inviting us to be part of this event, and we do hope that we can keep talking in this way. Next slide, please. So if you are a VCS service, if you hop onto our map, you'll find that there is a VCS section that you can go straight to, which allows you to engage with the map process. So if you just go to the next slide, please, it will show you that you can sign up to our charter, which captures the essence and the spirit of the partnership, and also go through the checklist process, which will hopefully allow you to become live on the map. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah now, who'll take you through the next step in the process.
Thanks very much, Nat. So I work with Nat as a regional coordinator. My area is the Midlands, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what our website actually looks like, and particularly the map feature. So if you can just pop to the next slide for me, please. So this is our homepage, and you can see that it's split up here into sort of parent, healthcare professional and VCS organisation panels. And the idea here is that these are the sort of three main kind of user groups that we see using our website, and hopefully by following the particular area that's relevant to you, then you will get a really user-friendly use of our website. So I'm going to go through pretending we're using a parent. So next slide, please. If you imagine that you've just ticked on the parent icon there, what will happen is that you come up with this page where you're invited to pop in a town or a postcode to try and find if there's any local support, local VCS support in your area. So you pop in here your postcode or town. Next slide, please. And then you've got a choice here as to whether you want to have a 1 kilometre radius up to a 30 kilometre radius. So I've chosen Birmingham here, and I've gone for a 10 kilometre radius, and then I'll just pick on this sort of magnifying glass here to search. Next slide, please. And then what happens is we start to see what VCS organisations are in the area which have signed up to our charter and the map. And so on the left-hand side, you will get a list then of all of the different services that are available in that area. They're in alphabetical order. So what we have here on the left is Approachable Parenting, who are based in Birmingham. And you've got a choice to view their website, or you can also click on this View More option on the left-hand side as well. So if I were to do that, we will get on to the next slide, please. And what comes up is a card, and this card will then provide more information about that organisation, a little bit of an overview, whether they have any specific areas that they work with, or and also their referral process. And you've then got that link to go to the website again. Now, on the right-hand side of your screens, you'll also at the moment see this alternative options. Now that wouldn't actually appear on the website on the right-hand side. It's actually at the bottom of the list of organisations, but this is there for any area that you type in. And so the alternative options that we list are around NHS IAP services and also specialist NHS perinatal mental health teams. And so if you were to type in an area at the moment which didn't have any local VCS services listed, because our map is still work in progress, and as Nat said, we very much invite you to sign up, then you are still going to get these alternative options appearing. Next slide, please. And then just to go through a few other things that are on the website specifically for parents. So the tone of our website is very much inclusive, friendly, welcoming, and part of this is to not assume any knowledge. So there's some frequently asked questions here around what specialist teams are, whether people need support or not, who IAPT are, perinatal mental health team, etc. Next slide. And then also our website covers crisis services. So specifically mentioning that Hearts and Minds partnership, as well as the VCS services listed on our map, are not crisis services. But if in reality you were able to scroll down right now, you would be able to see that we do list a number of crisis services which parents could contact should they need it. Next slide, please. And then we've talked today, you know, we've heard some really interesting things about different barriers that are in place for parents accessing support. These common Q&As we have put up, perhaps just try and sort of normalise some of these feelings that parents might be having, and to break down some of those barriers that might be in place to stop people actually accessing and reaching out for support in the first place. And last slide, please. So lastly, as Nat has already said, we very much welcome your input. If you do want to get in touch with us, you can do so via numerous means on our website and signing up to the map or the charter yourself, getting in touch with us via email, as well as following us and contacting us on social media. So thanks so much for your time today, and we really look forward to hearing from some of you.
Thank you, Sarah and Nat. That was really interesting, and I'm absolutely certain that that website and digital map and all the other brilliant work that you guys are doing will be so useful for many of us here today, and please do share far and wide. Okay, we're coming to the end of the event now. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rob, who's going to give you some information about how you can get your hands on the films, where they are, and how you can download them. So over to you, Rob.
Hi, yeah, can I have the next slide, please? So yeah, down to business. This is where you can get and access the films. So they're on our website. You can use that QR code there on the left, and it will take you directly to the area on the website where they are. Alternatively, you can put in that website address. We'll be sending all these slides to you in a post-webinar email, and so obviously you'll be able to see what you need to get to where you need to get to. So on the website, I've placed those in quite a prominent place. So on our main pages, forgive me for using that expression, but we have, it's divided into professionals and into mums and dads. And on the professional section, that's where we've put the videos for the launch at the moment. Like I say, if you go to that page, you'll see that they're all there prominently, quite near the top. Also, the links are there as well. So if you want to send the links in an email, you can just cut and paste those links. If you want to share on social media, if you scroll down to each video, when you put the mouse over the the video, you'll see a little share button will appear in the top right, and if you click on that, you can share to any social media place that you want to. If you want to embed the films in your website, or if there's anybody here who plans on doing that, you'll need to get the embed code from YouTube. So again, just hover the mouse over whichever video you want, and on the bottom right where the YouTube logo is, click on that YouTube logo. That'll take you to the video on the YouTube channel, and then there's another share button there now on the bottom right, and you click on that share button, and you can copy and paste the embed code. If you have any issues at all, when you go to where the videos are on our website, all those instructions are there anyway. If you have any difficulties with any of it, then please just drop us a line. Just email us at Team Acacia at acacia.org.uk, and we'll help you out with that. One more thing I need to say is that if you want the actual film files, so say you wanted them maybe for a waiting room or wherever, and you actually want the MPEG film files for doing that, again, just email us at Team Acacia, and we'll be happy to send you links so you can download the actual film files. Obviously, the success of this is going to be how widely these films are disseminated, and we'd love it for them to go out, really go out far and wide, especially on social media. But yeah, so I would really encourage you to embed them on your pages, to send them out by email, send them out by social media or whatever, so that they can be, you know, as much use as they can be. That's all I've really got to say about that. Back to you, Vicky.
Thank you, Rob. I'm just loving seeing the comments come in. Thank you so much, everybody. We're at the end. Look at that, we finished 15 minutes early. When does that ever happen? Thank you so much. If we could move to the next slide. I think that's our final slide now. Thank you so much for taking part, for joining us today. Just as Rob said, please share far and wide. We'd love them to be in GP surgeries, as a training for midwives, just far and wide. And this is the start. I'm sure we'll be doing more. And I just wanted to finish with a comment that I saw pop up, which I think sums it all up. It says, thank you so much for making me see things differently. I've learned so much today, which is the point of it all. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part, and do stay in touch. Take care.